Mark Twain could have told you all about censorship, including censorship of Mark Twain. When a library expels a book of mine, he wrote to Mrs. F.G. Whitmore in February 1907, and leaves an unexpurgated Bible lying around where unprotected youth and age can get hold of it, the deep unconscious irony of it delights me and doesn't anger me. But on our number one story, what would Twain make of the scenario in which the attitude towards racial epithets of all denominations had so changed that his use of one of them had pretty much taken one of his greatest works out of the hands of kids? And would he encourage or discourage an ardent admirer of his works, a scholar, from revising the text to eliminate the word and restore the rest of the book to its proper place in the pantheon of the classics? The Twain scholar is Alan Gribben, shown here lecturing on the adventures of Tom Sawyer at the Birmingham, Alabama Public Library. In an interview, Gribben says the lecture audiences are made up of teachers eager to teach Tom Sawyer, but not Huckleberry Finn. On almost every occasion, he says, teachers told him the 219 appearances of the N-word in Huck Finn made it off limits for their students. To rectify that, Gribben teamed with publisher New South Books to create a version of the book that replaces the N-word with the word slave and also removes a pejorative version of Native American. Gribben, who is the head of the English department at Auburn, tells Publishers Weekly, quote, "This is not an effort to render Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn colorblind. Race matters in these books. It's a matter of how you express that in the 21st century. For a single word to form a barrier, it seems such an unnecessary state of affairs." As you would expect, reaction to the new version is passionate. Fellow Twain scholar Thomas Wortham of UCLA calls Gribben a modern-day Thomas Baudelaire, the 18th century doctor whose family-friendly versions of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire and Shakespeare's works gave us the terms Bowdlerize and the sloppier Boulderize. Says Wortham, a book like Professor Gribben has imagined doesn't challenge children and their teachers to ask, why would a child like Huck use such reprehensible language? New South plans to have 7,500 copies of that book on shelves next month. Joining me now, Professor Melissa Harris Perry, Associate Professor of Politics and African American Studies at Princeton, MSNBC contributor and columnist for The Nation magazine. Good evening, Professor.
Hi, good to be here.
I'm of two minds on this. I mean, I hesitate to touch any author's work, and I despise censorship. And on the other hand, it's madness that Huckleberry Finn is essentially off limits to anybody until college or later. What do you think?
It is madness, certainly, that Huck Finn has been off limits. But the solution to that is to stop the madness, not to give into it. The idea that the N-word being purged from this text, and particularly purged and replaced with the word slave, is somehow going to fix the censorship problem, I think is both inaccurate, but also I think it's more troubling because it suggests, first of all, that we think young people don't hear the N-word as part of their pop cultural milieu. I mean, I just hate to break it to the good professor, but in fact, the N-word is pretty widely available. And so I'd rather than students and young people only hearing it in their kind of cultural world and in their music, to actually have to encounter it in a classroom with the teacher and with thoughtful peers to think and talk about what the word means, where it comes from, and why it's used in the context that it is in Twain's work.
One assumes that it's not that, I mean, that he's made that same leap that you have here, that what he's dealing with is, or what these teachers are dealing with is, complaints from parents or complaints from do-gooders or complaints from overly sensitive people, or just, we live in the era of the complaint and the umbrage. How do you attack that? How do you even begin to unravel that?
Well, part of it is, understanding the relative autonomy of art, the way in which cultural products, art, music contribute something to our life that is not just sort of a pretty package with a bow on it. Part of art's job is to sometimes be grotesque, to be difficult, to challenge us. I mean, the language that you use from Twain at the introduction here, where, he finds it absurd and almost enjoyable to have his text banned while the Bible, with all of the horrors that occur as part of just the biblical stories, not even the, the kind of interpretations, but just the horrible things that happen in the stories. So the idea that we can somehow make any of these cultural products, clean and nice is foolish. The whole point of culture and of literature is to challenge us.
Huckleberry Finn, at the time he wrote it, was banned in many places because it presented Jim as a human being and not as a stereotype. And now it's banned because Twain used a word that we've largely managed to, not purge is too strong a word, but control in some senses in society. Apart from the irony of that, isn't the issue here that Twain's purpose, his triumph in that book, is getting largely lost because of this?
Certainly, and let me again say that to replace the N-word with the word slave is also problematic. I like your point about Jim as a human being. When we use the word slave, it imagines that human beings who were enslaved were slaves. In other words, that their whole identity, everything we need to understand about them, is their condition of enslavement. It's one of the reasons that many historians have gone away from using the word slave and instead using the words enslaved persons or enslaved Africans to really distinguish that difference. The whole point here, or at least one of the many nuanced points for Twain, is that Huck Finn can be both helpful and derogatory, that there can be camaraderie without equality, that there are these challenging relationships. That's just what the book is asking us to do the work of thinking about.
Well, we know one thing for sure, purely from art, we can't call him enslaved person Jim. It sounds like an application on a form,
sounds
right?
bad, yes.
MSNBC contributor Melissa Harris Perry, great thanks for your time tonight, Melissa.
Thanks.
That's January 4th, 29 days since the Republicans got their deal for taxes for the rich. Mr. Boehner, where are the jobs? I'm Keith Olbermann. Good night and good luck. And now, 19